Good afternoon. Apologies for the delay in getting started today. I think we're all set to go. I'm joining from my phone, so please excuse me. Good afternoon. This is Committee Chair Kalila Slater Harrington, and I'd like to welcome you all to the January 13th, 2026 meeting of the Teaching and Learning Committee. I'd like to also say that we are having, I believe, the Teacher of the Year nominations are up and due February 6th. Please check out the City Schools website to find out more and make your nominations. If you have not done so, please mute your phone. Anyone who does not mute their phone may be muted by the call moderator or removed from the call. Additionally, please turn your camera off if you are not a board member or the CEO and her staff. I will now read a roll call of the board to identify who is present. Please identify yourself first before speaking for the record. Commissioner Chicas Guzman. I believe she'll be absent today. Commissioner Kenyatta Bay. Okay, I believe he'll be joining us later. And Commissioner Woodruff.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Woodruff here.
Great. I am present as well. I don't think that we have any public comment today, but for future notice, members of the public who would like to provide comment to this committee can do so by written or pre-recorded testimony. Please submit your written testimony or pre-recorded video the day before the committee meeting. Up to 5 individuals will be given the opportunity to provide comment to the Teaching and Learning Committee, and speakers will be granted 3 minutes. All public comments should address topics related to teaching and learning. Individuals or groups interested in providing comment to the committee may sign up one of 3 ways. You can email public comment at bcps.k12.md.us or call our board office at 443-642-4095. You may also call the board office with any questions you have about this procedure. Finally, the chat function during our virtual meetings will not be used as a tool for gathering feedback or answering questions from the public. If you have questions or follow-up or need to give feedback, please again contact our board office and they will provide a response for you. With that said, I'd like to get us back on track with the schedule and begin with our presentation on supporting our continuum of learners.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Kevin Cuppet. I'm the Executive Director for for Teaching and Learning here in City Schools. And I also will have a co-presenter today, Mr. Dennis Jutras, who's our Coordinator of Gifted and Advanced Learners. Again, we're here to talk about our continuum of learners as today's presentation. And if somebody can just confirm that advanced, we see that okay? Thanks, Dennis. So these are the board strategic priorities that the continuum of learners work that we do supports, not only relevant and rigorous instruction, but all of the equity components associated with these board priorities. These are far-reaching programs, and so it really does touch a lot of what the board is trying to do, and we're happy to support that work. So who are the continuum of learners as we have that? So we think about this as 3 groups of students, but it's important to note that a single student might be a member of multiple groups within here. So if students with disabilities, it's about 15.2% of our population here in City Schools. We have our multilingual learner population, and for many of us, this might have been termed ESOL or English language learners in the past, but the current term that's used in federal government and state is multilingual learners, so we've adopted that here. About 14.4% of our student population are identified as multilingual learners. And of course, we have our gifted and advanced learners, which is 11.9% of our students have been identified as in that GAL category. We're going to give you some terminology and acronyms. We know that this exists in any space, but education, we certainly have our own. I'm going to go down the left side and I'll turn it over to Mr. Jutras to cover those. But again, multilingual learner is the new term of art. And basically that means a student who receives English language development instruction. So they certainly participate in our academic program, but in addition to that, they're going to get this ELD, or English language development instruction. And that's what ELD stands for. And so we refer to the programming as ELD and the learner as a multilingual learner. We also will be mentioning our Multilingual Enrollment and Support Center, which we shorten here as MESC. And that is the group that is responsible for enrolling students, most significantly students who come to us from outside of the country, but sometimes who are transferring from another district and will have English language development needs. The fourth one that I'll point out is called Access for Multilingual Learners. That is an MCAP, a Maryland assessment program that measures English language proficiencies for our MLs. And we administer that annually in the month of January. And that's how we chart progress that students are making on their English development. And so I'll turn it over to Mr. Jutras.
Thank you, Dr. Cuppet. So we have 3 tiers of identification for our GAL students as laid out in policy IHBB. The first tier is what we call talent development. These students are identified solely on having higher than average ability scores. Once identified as talent development, students can only move up. They don't move out or exit. They move up. And so the second tier would be advanced. So those are students who, in addition to having higher than average ability scores or scores of potential, have also demonstrated achievement, norm reference achievement in math and reading in the 80 to 89th percentile. The next tier up from that is gifted, more traditionally identified at the 90th to 99th percentile in achievement scores in math and reading. The last term we want to introduce is SENG. It stands for Supporting the Emotional Needs of the Gifted. It's actually it's a free 7-week program that we offer for families, run through my staff, and we have regular sign-up opportunities for that throughout the year.
Thank you, Mr. Jutras. Appreciate that. All right. Okay, the first group that we mentioned earlier are students with disabilities, and we just wanted to remind the committee here that a comprehensive special education update was presented to the board in November. You can actually access that from the link that's here in the slide deck. And so with that context acknowledge, we're going to move on to that continuum of learners, multilingual learners. Now, Maria Remore, who is the director of this program, is unavailable to be here. So I'm going to be presenting on her behalf, and hopefully I do okay with it. All right, so multilingual learners. So just to paint a picture of who those multilingual learners are here in city schools, it is not a monolithic group. There's a lot of diversity here. The vast majority languages spoken in the home, of course, is Spanish. But as you work your way down through there, this is the top 10 of frequency that we see. Persian, I asked about that. Those are languages like Farsi and Dari. But you can see it's not just, as some people might perceive, a group of Spanish-speaking students. There's way more diversity here in city schools. As far as like where those students are being serviced, if you look, this is kind of a heat map. So the color that you see on the eastern side, that bright yellow surrounded by the red, that shows you where there is a lot of our students are living and attending schools. And then you'll see in the lower left side there, there's 2 red areas, one in the upper left, but all of that blue haze throughout the map there just shows you that multilingual learners, in fact, they're in 91% of our schools. So you can see that many of our students have the opportunity to, many of our schools have the opportunity to serve these students. The percentage of multilingual learners, of students identified that, is 14.4%, as I mentioned, and that's down from 14.7% in the previous year. So let's talk a little bit about the actual numbers behind that. As you can see, these are different numbers for the populations in straight numbers. So right now, as you can see, we have 11,017 across all of our grades, and that's down about 300 students from the previous year. And then you can see in the blue, the light blue, and the yellow are the different grade bands as to how many students are enrolled at each of those areas. Sometimes we get questions about why the decline in enrollment, this small drop of 300 students. What we're seeing is that decrease is in the number of what we call newcomer students who are new to the United States and enrolling for the first time in city schools. Younger students like pre-K and K students are actually enrolling at roughly the same rate as they have in the past. And we're also not seeing a sharp increase in withdrawal, students who are leaving the system that's any different than what we've had in the past. So really around those newcomers, new to the country is where we're seeing the enrollment changes. All right. All right. So this is some information a little bit about how students are attending. I'll orient the commissioners to the way that this chart is set up. So there's 3 distinct groups. You can see on the left side, we have a pre-K through 5 group. Then in the middle, we have our middle school grades, and to the right, our high schools. Within those, go back to pre-K through 5, you'll see 3 distinct groups outlined here. One are multilingual learners in the first 2 columns. In the middle, we have students who are not multilingual learners and never have been. And in the third column, we have a group of students that we call exited. And exited students are students who have gone through the learning journey with us, have developed their English language to the point where they're dismissed from needing those English language development services, and they continue in their educational journey. So we often will see students who start with us in the early grades might be exited around 4th or 5th grade. They stay in this category as they move through their educational journey. So this is around attendance rates. And so as you look, multilingual learners generally have better attendance rates than students who are not multilingual learners. And students who are exited, who are not receiving those services, are continuing with their educational programming, are actually an even higher rate. And you can see that we've had some slight increases over the last year from 23-24 to last year's 24-25 data. The next graph or chart is set up in a very similar way. Whoops. So this is around that chronic absentee measure that we look at. Again, 3 separate areas for grade bands from left to right. And you can see that in general, chronic absentee rates for multilingual learners is lower than our non-multilingual learners, and our exited group is generally very, very low. The biggest chronic absenteeism drop that we saw was in that middle school range, where we had an 8.3 percentage point drop. That's fantastic work, and that's work that's done by a number of people. Certainly our central team tries to impact that, but most importantly, schools working with kids every day and trying to support them is what leads to these reductions in chronic absenteeism. And thank you to our parents who are working hard to get kids to school. So it's a team effort to really move these numbers. The next slide is related to growth targets on access. I mentioned that access assessment is administered in January, and when a student receives a particular score, we set growth targets for them to be able to move from one year to the next. And so this takes it by grade band and shows you the percentage of students who met that target from one year to the next. So you can see that in the early grades, that the students meeting that target when language development is very fresh for students and brains are developing, that they're meeting those growth targets pretty well. And then that kind of tapers off as the students who are in the older. Now, what this doesn't show, and I think this is very important, is that some students actually enter into the country and are given that first access assessment when they are 6th graders. They weren't with us in the learning journey when they were younger students. And so those students are trying to develop their English language at a much later time in life. And so that is there's some variance there in how we look at this particular growth chart. But this is something teachers are looking at. They want to help their students move and meet those growth targets from year to year so that students are developing language in a way that that helps them be productive students. So we wanted to highlight some programmatic things that are occurring. There's a lot here. Each of these is a pretty significant body of work, but I'm going to highlight some of them. The first one is integrated professional learning for ELD teachers across core content areas. So ELD teachers, I think, get better at their practice. They're already kind of language experts, but they get better at their practice when they understand what's expected in content areas like math, science, social studies, and literacy. And so this professional learning is really trying to develop our ELD teachers' content understanding. And that's been an option we've had for teachers, and it's gone very well. I actually went and saw it on our last Systemic Professional Day. The second item is around the writing revolution. You've heard about that. We've talked about that in our literacy updates. We've talked about it in other updates as well. You're going to continue to hear about that. It is our system commitment to build strong writers. And ELD teachers and coaches have been involved in a professional learning community to try to figure out how they can leverage these writing revolution strategies with students who are also developing language. The next one is around the full rollout of our Elevation platform with multilingual learner data and strategy. So this has been rolled out to all schools this year. There was a small subset of schools that worked on it last year. It's actually the platform, the ML data and strategies are two parts of the platform. The ML data is really around setting language goals for students, which we do as part of our ELD programming, and how teachers monitor students' progress on that. But the other part of the platform also gives them strategies to target those. And so it's a great resource for teachers. One of the ways we're trying to incentivize folks to use that platform effectively is in the next, which is that opportunity for all staff to earn those PDPs, professional development points, in Elevation. So we've set up some learning pathways for them, and so they can get some licensure points towards their renewal of their licensure by working in that platform. The fifth area there is the dual language programming, which is where we're teaching students in both English and Spanish, depending on their grade level. How much time is in Spanish or English varies, but it's a dual language approach. It's currently in full implementation at Lakeland Elementary Middle School. I actually got to go and do a tour of that. It is fantastic programming. It's a very vibrant learning community in that school. Principal Garcia and I had a great time as she took me on the tour, telling us about the programming they do. Very passionate, and kudos to our school partners out there. Great work. And our ELD team centrally supports that as well. The other school, John Rura, has been growing their program. They now have the dual language program in place in grades pre-K through second, and their hope is to continue to roll up as students move through. The final one is around our school success liaisons. We have several of those who are specifically supporting multilingual learner programming, and they go out and support our networks and support teachers directly on programming and support school leaders. So they're an awesome resource. I've had an opportunity to actually meet with them all recently and hear about their work. What an enthusiastic, bright group who are dedicated to supporting our students. So kudos to them. So the next slide is about looking ahead. One of the goals is that integrated PL that we had where ELD teachers were learning about content. The phase 2 of that is providing professional learning opportunities for those content teachers to really grow in the ELD strategy. So think of it as the kind of the opposite direction of learning. The second item there, continuing to refine supports for schools, professional learning, coaching, case management. That's kind of that continuous improvement, family engagement that the ELD team here centrally are trying to focus on. Another area, this is very exciting, I think, for many people when they hear about this, is the expansion of the Seal of Biliteracy. And so the Seal of Biliteracy here in Maryland says that if I'm a student who, say, originally spoke, my primary language was Farsi, I was in our English language development program here, I continued to grow my proficiency in Farsi, but also now in English. Prior to graduation, I can assess and have measures to indicate that I'm actually proficient in both language. And then I can have on my graduation certificate that seal of biliteracy. It's a program that's been growing across the state of Maryland, and we're excited to continue to support that. I did get a budget request internally that I needed to buy more exams this year because more and more students are interested, and that's a fantastic thing to spend our money on. And then the last one is continued collaboration with district offices for supporting our multilingual families. Ms. Reedmore and I had a conversation about what are other areas where our families who primary language is not English at home need to hear from us, excuse me, as a school district. Excuse me. So as a way to support their students. And so we're reaching out to other district offices to see what we can do to support them in that work. So at this time, that's going to wrap it up for multilingual learners. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Jutras to talk about gifted advanced learners. And Mr. Jutras, just let me know when you need a slide advance.
Thank you, Dr. Cuppett, and I will certainly do that. And thank you for moving it to the next slide anyway. The Reader's Digest version of all these slides is that all the arrows are going in the right direction. Our numbers are up, our participation is up, and we become more equitable over the years. But this slide in particular, you'll notice that if you look at 22-23 all the way to 25-26, we're almost up 3,000 formally identified GAL students since 22-23. You'll notice there has been an increase in our African American identification and our Latino identification. I'm happy to report that over 73% of all of our students who are GAL identified in city schools are students of color. Next slide, please. So, great, you've identified all these kids. Now what, Dennis? And so now what is we're looking at their achievement pieces. We want to make sure we're identifying them so that we can feed them appropriately, engage them in rigorous learning, and keep them coming to school on a regular basis. So what we have here are 4 years worth of MCAP data specific to ELA in this particular case. So again, as at the beginning of the presentation, we identified the 3 tiers. Gifted is our top tier, advanced is our middle tier, talent development is our entry tier. In many ways, our talent development students are very close to their non-GAL students as far as identification goes. There's only one metric used to formally identify a talent development student. So I always look at our non-GAL student performance versus the talent development students as giving us an indication, because all things being equal, our talent development students, if they're not fed, should be flat or be comparable to the non-GAL lines. And you'll see across gifted, advanced, but most importantly, talent development growth, certainly over this last year in particular, but across those 4 years. And we'll see the same type of thing on the next slide when we go to math. And again, for math, same type of thing. There was a dip last year. The board members who were on the committee last year may remember me explaining the slight dip, and that's partially because our numbers are fluid. And so usually the barrier to formal identification is math. So if a student's talent development, they may be outstanding in ELA, but the math has held them back. So I know for a fact that we had some students who suddenly were performing in math, and so they came out of talent development, they jumped into the advanced category. But regardless of last year's little blip, which I understood why, you'll see 24% of our talent development students were at the proficient, so levels 3 and 4 on the most recent MCAP. But again, trajectory progress over each of those years. Next slide, please. Now we talk about, so great, now what happens when we get to kids in middle school? What are the opportunities for those particular students? And again, it's not just the GAL students. When I talk to the AP slide, you're going to see most of our AP students are not GAL students, but we need to make sure that we're building opportunities for our GAL students, and other students who are not formally identified can still avail themselves to those opportunities. So on the left-hand side of the screen here, you'll see the board may remember that we talked last year that we did a big push with ILEDs and with principals to say we need to expand opportunities to more students for honors opportunities. So we saw like a 3,000 seat opportunity. So keep in mind that one student might fill 4 seats. So they're doing honors in math, English, social studies, and science. So those are not student counts, those are seat counts. But even though we experienced a huge growth the prior year, if you look at this year, we still continue to grow. On the right side, we're talking about students taking high school credit bearing courses. These are not like a light version. These are the exact same courses they would get in 9th or 10th grade. The two courses in particular that embody the largest number of our students would be Algebra 1, which has been growth area for several years, and English 1. I'm happy again to report we're the first district in the state of Maryland that's allowing our accelerated learners to earn a high school English 1 credit while they're in 8th grade, and they're continuing to thrive and be successful. Next slide, please. Advanced placement, as I mentioned before, again, the things I would call out here. Again, yes, the bottom line there are unique students. We continue to move up. So it was from 3,000 just a few years ago. It's 4,461 students. This past year, it's more than that this year, but I can't report that out until those kids actually complete their courses and take their test. But what I really want to draw attention to is that light blue line and that top green line. Those are the number of tests taken versus the number of seats. And so in a perfect world, I should see an intersection between the number of tests taken and the number of seats. What I see is a very, very narrow gap, and it's been narrowing over the years. To me, that communicates the fact that our students not only are prepared to take the test, but they feel prepared. And that's because we have all but 7 of our AP teachers out of the 180 or so AP teachers in the district have been formally trained, and that's what our strategy has been for several years. And so that gap has continued to decrease. Again, just pointing out the demographics. You can see the makeup of our students. You see there was a big pickup of African-American students a couple of years ago. That continues to be our story. We are primarily a district that our AP students are students of color, which is our district. And so that's the right students are actually sitting in our AP classes as they should. And I just want to point out, I want to disabuse people of the notion that only the GAL students get into AP classes. In fact, most AP students are not GAL students. And that's fine. They all fall under our jurisdiction, and I love them equally. Next slide, please. Oh, speaking of people that we love, Alexandra Washington, who is this wonderful young lady who is smiling in front of us here. She was recently awarded a national scholarship, the Dr. Martin D. Jenkins Scholars Award. This is recognized high achievement from highly gifted African-American students. So this is awarded by the National Association for Gifted Children. Last year, you may remember, we had the first ever Latino student recognized by that same body as winning a national award. We in city schools are not taking second place to anyone because our kids are too great to be held back. Next, I want to call out 4 schools in particular. This is the 12th consecutive year of eGate, which is Excellence in Gifted and Talented Education. You can see the banner behind me there. Something we're very proud of. We're the district with the longest continuous win streak. We had 4 schools recently will be getting their recognition next month, actually, at a state event. But Armstead Gardens received their second. It's a 5-year renewal process. So Armstead Gardens received their second, Cross Country their third, Hampstead Hill their third, and happy to report Holabird, first year out of the gate, applied and received just shy of a perfect score. So our schools are second to none in the eGate community in Maryland. Our overall ID rate, as Dr. Cuppet called that earlier, 11.9%. That represents an all-time high. That's up by over a percentage point from last year, which was over a percentage point from the year before that. We have presented at national conferences, state conferences on the work that we're doing in city schools. We had nearly 200 educators once again participate in the statewide conference this year. And the Council of Great City Schools ranked city schools as number 4 in the best quartile for change in performance for our farms or free and reduced price students over the course of several years for taking and participating in AP courses. Next slide, please. There, again, you can see the specific data points. This represents the growth that took place between the 23-24 and 24-25 admission. I'm not going to read it to you. Again, pluses are always good in this kind of a report. And you're seeing that we have, again, more students of color, more Latina students participating. But also, I do want to call out increase in qualifying scores. The long-term strategy has always been make sure our teachers are trained, make sure we have resources in the classrooms, and the success rate for our students will come. And that is what we're seeing now. We're starting to witness that not only are we having greater participation, and you'd expect that if you expand to more students, that you start to see a decrease in their success rates, and that's contrary to what we're actually seeing. We're seeing more students taking more exams, doing better than ever before in city schools. Next slide, please. Looking ahead, I just want to call out that we have on order 7,600 plus AP exams. So again, in a perfect world, we'll have 7,600 tests administered. We've just started as part of our self-reflection. We knew that we need to create an advisory council. So we started an advisory council of parents and guardians to kind of give some insight to my team to think how we can improve the work we're doing. We've specifically identified 18 schools that we're working with to help them with identification rates that they're lagging behind what the state expects and what we personally expect. We will continue to sustain our professional learning approaches for our GAL leads. Because they are part-time positions essentially, or that they're mostly filled by classroom teachers, they need as much support as possible. So they need a carved out protected space. And so we're looking to continue with that protected carved out space for the professional learning. As I mentioned earlier, we are always open to engage families. We do that virtually through office hours that run for 2 hours every month. We do quarterly Get to Know Gifted. We are hosted at various schools. The next one is coming up is at ACE next month, I believe. Yes, next month. And then, as I mentioned before, Free to Families are the second cohorts to really just help parents. Just because you're a parent or a guardian of a gifted learner doesn't mean you know how to raise or work with that gifted learner. You might sometimes think that, oh my God, I'm doing a horrible job, when in fact, every other parent of a gifted student feels the same way. And so we kind of walk families through that to let them know you're doing fine and here's what you can expect. We'll continue to look at virtual options because not every middle school is constructed in a way to allow for expansion of honors courses. We want to make sure that every kid that can and wants to is able to participate in honors courses in middle grades. And finally, working on codifying guidance on credit by exam, original credit options, and single subject acceleration, all of which are called out in regulation IHBB-RA, but we need to codify that. And I believe something is coming to the board soon, I think next month, that will address some of those. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jutras. Appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here and see if there are any questions.
Thank you both for such thorough presentations. Well, I see we've already got one question. I'll jump into mine after Kenyatta Bay. Commissioner?
Good day. Hey, how y'all doing? First of all, I want to thank y'all for all the work that you are doing. It's just fabulous. It is marginalization does not only hit an upper strata, it also hits a lower strata too, and both ways. It cuts both ways. And what you've done is made a more inclusive environment, and I want to thank you for it. I'm glad that we're rolling in to better tracking of the supports that our ELD students need, because I do spend my days working with the same tools. So I understand the need. The supports of going both ways, though, and I heard that you're trying to get more content teachers to understand ELD, because I think that's really where we really kind of run into a wall sometimes, because ELD teachers are basically trained to reach into different content areas. I mean, that's part of understanding the language, or even teaching and instructional language. But coming the other way, how are those supports built to help content teachers to begin to understand the stratifications they have to make to provide for ELD students?
Yeah, so there's, I mean, I can't speak in depth to this. I'm not sure if Miss Ruiz is on the call or not. I can't remember if we had her come in. So one of the things that is helpful is the strategies that are laid out in the Elevation platform. Those are not just ELD only teacher strategies. They could be used for all students. But there's a number of things that teachers can do to try to make learning more accessible, comprehensible input, realia, those types of things, those kind of SIOP-based strategies. What we're trying to do is how do we equip teachers to have that? As you know, in undergraduate work, there might be only a little bit of information about how we meet the needs of whether it's a gifted and talented student or a multilingual learner. I think undergrad programs have a little bit more associated with working with students with disabilities. But that's something that we try to do for our professional learning. I'd happy to touch base back with the team to give you some of the specific actions that they've taken to build that capacity in our content teachers.
Dr. Cupp, if I may, I will say there's been a concerted effort this year that every time when the content teams are building out their professional learning arcs, Special education, MLs, and GAL are consulted to look through their presentations, so look through their arcs and give feedback on it so they can talk about what are some pivots, what are some moves that you can bring into your math PD, that you can bring into your social studies PD that then reflects the continuum or the full range of diverse learners. So that I would say this is the first year ever that I can recall there being this really strong concerted effort, and I can attest that we've been meeting regularly with those content teams to help build that out in their professional learning. So I can vouch for that much.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you
Appreciate that.
so very much, gentlemen. I deeply appreciate it, especially when I tend to represent a community that feels a little bit out of sorts right now. And your attendance data actually shows that there's a push that to grow in those communities. And so I thank you very much for the work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Woodruff, do you have any questions?
I do. Good afternoon. Thank you for this presentation. Learned quite a bit here. I really appreciated that one of the focus areas includes intervention for schools with the lowest identification of gifted learners. So definitely appreciate that, the thoughtfulness there. I have one question that maybe there's just more information that you all can send me for my own understanding of like the talent development, like what that means and what that entails. I just don't have that context. So we don't have to go into that today. My other question is, what are some of the you mentioned that there are barriers to expanding like honors and credit bearing courses. What are some of those barriers that the board should keep in mind, especially as we think about budget season coming up? And then my second question is around the percentage of students who are both identified as needing special education services as well as gifted and talented, and what type of collaboration or support is available for students who kind of fall in both of those categories.
Okay, so those sound like they're all targeted to me. So let me see what I can do here. Let me try to do talent development very quickly. Talent development, again, all that means is we universally screen every kindergarten student in the first semester of the year. We use a nonverbal ability screener called the Naglieri. Other students are invited to take that too, as we're trying to do a better job of talent spotting. What we know with talent development students is that they have the potential to learn faster. And so we want to make sure we see them as soon as we possibly can. And so they are part of the whole collection of GAL students, and they get the same rights and privileges, or protections, I should say, not privileges, more protections, things like the individualized learning plan. I would say following this presentation, there is a compliance report that the commissioners were given. You can see a lot more of that. I'm not going to forget the barriers question, but I do want to talk about the students with disabilities piece. One of the pieces that's linked in the compliance report will show you that approximately 12% of our GAL identified students are also students with disability, which I'm going to tell you quite candidly is higher than the average nationwide or even across the state of Maryland. My team regularly presents to 504 chairs. My team sits in on IEP and 504 meetings. We work very, very closely with special education. In fact, we physically sit inside the special education part of the building here. So we're regularly working on that. I will also say that 3 of my 4 ed specialists are themselves parents of twice exceptional learners, or might even identify themselves as twice exceptional. So that's something very near and dear to our hearts, and trust and believe that they are working very actively to make sure more and more people know about this thing called twice exceptional. I'm not going to address all the barriers to honors, but the most basic one is some of our middle schools just don't have enough room. So you have some schools that have only 1 6th grade class, 1 7th grade class, 1 8th grade class. It's impossible. It's not fair to say the 30 kids in that class now all have to do honors level work if they don't want to, and they're not prepared to do that. But it's also unfair to say the 7 kids that want to and can't because we aren't able to do that. So That's not so much a budget thing as it is that there are physical barriers, right? And then again, some of these things might be remedied if we were to think about an expanded equitable access to virtual learning, because, I'm not going to challenge a school and say you physically can't add a second section, but we need to be able to bring these opportunities to students. I hope those address the 3 questions you raised.
They did. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. And actually, my questions were related and got answered either with your response, Mr. Jutras, or through the compliance report. For our multi lingual learners, and I think Commissioner Kenyatta kind of alluded to this as well in his remarks regarding attendance. And I guess I don't know if I have a fully formulated question, but given the political landscape and atmosphere, I have to imagine that is impacting our multilingual learner attendance rates. And wanted to see if you could speak to or further expound on efforts to work around chronic absence among multilingual learners.
Yeah, I think the work that we do from a chronic absentee perspective for multilingual learners is in part some of the same work we do for any student who's chronically absent, right? So there's, I know that I understand I'm newer here to city schools, but we have some central supports for schools on how to address chronic absenteeism. I think one of the key factors in this for our multilingual families is the trust they have with the school, the connection. I mean, I felt as a school principal that oftentimes the system work that we wanted to do must be routed through the school because that is the closest relationship that we have. I don't have any data in front of me right now related to attendance patterns for this year. As you can see in the slide deck, it's from the 2 previous years. So I can't speak to that, but I can say that the schools see all their students as their students, and so they'll be implementing those strategies related to chronic absenteeism across the board. I know that Ms. Remore and I have had an initial conversation. It was tied to that mentioned in the slide about reaching out to other office to support multilingual learners. In that conversation is to reach out to like our Office of Wholeness, Equity Office, Schools Office, if there are additional things that we could do from our team to support schools. So we are having that conversation, but it's early and I don't really have any specific action items that I can lay out right now because it's in a developmental process.
Okay. All righty. I'll look forward to any future updates with that
Yeah,
regard.
absolutely.
I know that family and community engagement is doing work as well, just to ensure that we provide welcoming environments. And I'm glad to see that in your outbound, you talked about the integration of family and community engagement with, particularly with our multilingual learners. Excuse me, I'm coughing up a lung or resisting coughing up a lung while we're talking. I'll in my comments there and just say thank you for the presentation, and the committee will follow up if we have any additional questions.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Appreciate your time.
Moving on to the compliance report. I don't know if Mr. Jutras is going to stay on for the compliance report or if my fellow commissioners had any questions about what was provided.
I'm remaining available to answer any questions, but it's not a presentation.
Correct. Okay. So I'm hearing no questions from my fellow commissioners. I just wanted to draw attention what caught my eye is that, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to deal with this cold. Um, in the absence of um, uh, GAL leads in each school, really empowering our principals or education leaders to be able to include and monitor and include that in their work. I'm not even giving this justice. Excuse me, just I have to cough. I think this came under, let me look at my notes, the universal screening in the absence of a full-time GAL lead in schools, the administrator, suggesting that the administrator proactively monitor the status of testing. Can you talk a little bit about that and how ILEDs can include that in their assessment of principal leaders with the
Certainly. Yeah. No, again,
that,
continue, Ed.
expound on that recommendation, please. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Yes, go off mic and cough. Hopefully keep one lung going is fine. Yeah, so what the recommendation is that, I'd like to see ILADs, and I'll be honest, they're very much in the loop, especially in the month of December. I provide them a daily update as to the progress of a formalized universal screening at each of the schools, and the ILADs have been tremendous at reaching out to their principals and reminding them that this is a requirement and non-negotiable. So numbers dramatically improve before we hit the winter break, which is our kind of cutoff target. We'll continue to work with ILEDs and just work with them that just make GAL part of the regular conversation, just as they would make let's talk about Reveal, let's talk about Wisdom, let's talk about MCAP. Like, let's also talk about GAL identification. Let's talk about ILPs. Let's talk about Naglieri screening. That's all. I mean, I live for the day that this just becomes a fluid kind of like, we're going to talk about kids, which means we're going to talk about the entire range of students, inclusive of those that have higher than average potential or have higher than average potential and have higher than average achievement. What are we doing to make sure that all students are engaged, are seen, engaged, and allowed to flourish? I don't know if that answers your question.
Agreed. It does. I just wanted you to
Okay.
expand that a little bit.
Sure.
I think, Commissioner Woodruff asked about, looking for that alignment between our most vulnerable students and finding the gifted among them. And special education is a spectrum. And so our gifted students are on special education, just like our more vulnerable learners are. And so having that conversation and that continuum about how do we continue to move those students on who are ready, monitoring the regular assessment of that so that we can lift them up and move them ahead where advancement is needed. And so I think it's, I totally agree that as we're talking through student data, as leaders are talking through student data, that it be very much a part of the conversation and the expectation that we do have advanced learners,
Yeah.
and that it is a spectrum.
As Dr. Cuppet called out earlier, it's when we talk about the continuum of learners, we have students that are twice exceptional and our MLs and our GAL. And so it's not necessarily you're in one bucket at the time. And there is an equity index slide that's connected to the compliance report. I would draw everyone's attention later as you're viewing it to look and see the equity index. And you'll see we have MLs that are also part of GAL. We have students with disability. I don't have a flag that if you're an ML who's a student with disability and a GAL student, but they exist. Trust me, they exist. And I will say we also are starting to track for the first time our exited ML students, and they're actually identified at a higher than equitable rate. And we are also started to add in our economically disadvantaged upon the recommendation of OAA, which I thank them for that. And so we recognize the fact that we have gifted and advanced and talented development students among our entire population, and we won't rest until we find as many as we physically and humanly possibly can.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. All righty. Well, I appreciate that. I'll invite my fellow commissioners once again before we move on. Any questions? Did I pass my cough on to you?
I already had it, but thank you for thinking that.
All righty. I don't think I could pass germs on virtually, but you know.
You never know.
You never know. All righty. Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank you all
Duchesne.
for your time.
We'll move on to our procurement. I think we only have one item. Who's joining us today?
Shabray Matthews, Director of
Hey,
Procurement.
Shabray!
Hello, hello, good
Hello.
afternoon. Good
Good to
afternoon.
see you. I haven't seen you
So-
all year.
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I said I haven't seen you all year, meaning
Yes,
Happy-
Happy New Year, City Schools family. So today we have one procurement item for consideration. Item 12.01, the Chief Academic Officer and the Executive Director of Special Education request the board's approval of a competitively bid requirements contract with multiple vendors to provide applied behavior analyst services for students with documented clinical needs for assessment and/or services. The estimated annual contract amount is $1.6 million. The contract term is January the 15th, 2026 through June 30th, 2028 with 1 2-year renewal option. And I'm sorry, the estimated annual contract amount is 1.6 million.
okay. Any commissioners, do you have any questions? Okay.
Hi, this is Commissioner Scott Woodruff having some camera difficult. Oh, there's my camera. Can you just talk a
Hello.
little bit about, hi, how are you? A little bit about like historically have like BCBAs been used in schools and kind of what that looks like. And then the other question, I know it's divided, I think there were like 12 or so providers, maybe a little bit more, that will be awarded the contracts. And I also saw that it is kind of at the school level, like what exactly they would be doing. There were a myriad of different specific, like different things that the therapist would be doing. Can you just, any context around like the primary focus of like what they have done traditionally, just for like context building would be helpful.
Okay, Shabray wouldn't do that. Let's bring on, let's see, who is on from special ed or
Okay.
the CAS?
So it should be either Denise, Erica, or Casey.
We'll give them a minute. It could be that they are on, but not a speaker.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's
Hey,
Casey.
Casey.
Hello.
And Denise is on to speak. She just doesn't have access to speak.
Got
If
it.
someone
Awesome.
could give Denise access, that would be great.
Thanks, Lori Lynn. Yeah, because I can't, but Denise is better positioned to speak to the work of the BCBAs themselves. But I also didn't want you to think that we weren't on here. So
No
here we
problem.
are. So hopefully we can get Denise the access to speak so that she can really speak to historically how they've been used, and then can also address your other questions.
But while we are waiting for her, I will confirm that 18 vendors are being awarded under the contract.
Kenyatta Bay, I saw your hand. Did you want to put your question out there? And then when we get Denise access, she'll be able to respond.
Yes, my question is very simply as to contractual guardrails. When you have a multiplicity of vendors involved, there has to be a parameter, and it may be also within the same answering scope as the previous question. I just wanted to know guardrails for vendors. What are specific boundaries when we're talking about multiplicity of vendor access? Okay, that's basically, if you can also speak to that. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the question, Commissioner. I apologize. Can you restate your question?
Okay, when you have a multiplicity
Multi-
of vendor capability,
Mhm.
okay, there is a specific parameter guideline that you use in that contractual construct. Okay, and I wanted to know the source of that or the look of that guardrail that our vendors have to adhere to there in order to be accepted into the fold, so to speak. You understand what I'm saying?
I'm trying to discern whether it's a Shabray question or a Denise question. So are you asking the
I
procurement?
think I think it kind of goes back into, I think it's more of a Denise question.
Hey, Denise.
Hi, guys.
Uh-huh.
Hey,
I'm
Denise.
on now.
All right.
All right. So good evening, afternoon, Denise Mabry. I'm the Director of Compliance and Due Process in the Office of Special Education. And to answer the first question around some of the supports that BCBAs provide for our district overall. So in the past, we have utilized BCBAs to support our public separate day schools. They support with supporting teachers around professional learning, how to deal with our students who have most difficult behaviors in our separate day schools. They do a lot of data analysis around applied behavior supports, how to collect data, how to analyze the data, and to support teachers around implementation of these strategies within the classroom. So that's how they've been supporting us with our students in our public separate day schools. As far as other BCBAs, we have a grant, MSEECCEIS grant, where we have BCBA support us district-wide, and they work with our staff and Office of Special Education around implementation of and development of functional behavior assessments, FBAs, around our behavior development of our BIPs, our behavior implementation plans, to make sure that schools are appropriately addressing and identifying severe behaviors. And again, how can our school staff provide strategies and supports within the classroom? And also any type of professional learning we have for our schools around behavior. They support around behaviors for FBA and BIPs. They support with that professional learning as well. And they also work with our related service providers around development and implementation of FBAs and BIPs. So they really support us around students who have that most severe behaviors, and how we can best support them in our district so that we are not referring them out to our non-public schools or other settings around the district.
Denise, can you speak to, I want to just level set for
Okay.
commissioners and the public who might be listening in with regard to the public separate day school. Can you name off a couple to give an example of what that, to put it into real context, Commissioner? And then I know what a BIP is, but like, you know, we're just using, it's not in everybody's lexicon. So I just wanted to make sure that we're coloring in some of the language that you're using.
No worries. So public separate day schools are like our Bear School with our students who are medically fragile. Lois T. Mary, we have our students who are cognitively delayed and also have behavioral issues. We have Sharp Latin Hall, who have students who are again with behavioral issues, Briscoe, and Claremont. So these are our public separate day schools who serve our students who are, need a more restrictive environment and have some more challenging behaviors or academically and or behaviorally that can be supported in a regular public day school.
Thank you. That helps give context to it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then when I say FBA is functional behavior assessment that is conducted prior to putting the behavior intervention plan in place, which is our BIP. So we do a assessment to identify what those triggering behaviors are and how we can best support classroom teachers with identifying those behaviors and dealing with those behaviors within the classroom. And that's when we develop a behavior intervention plan. And those are monitored annually.
Got it. Commissioner Scott Woodruff, does that help give more context?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
And for, I think, around the second question around the gradual, how do we guardrail our vendors? Again, they do go through the procurement process to ensure that they meet all requirements through our procurement process. We also meet with the vendors in person. Executive Director Lori Lynn and I have met with the vendors in person to make sure that they're able to support the needs of our district before we bring them on. And then we also reach out to other districts to see if they provide support to those districts and see how they're working within those districts. So we do meet with them. We reach out to other districts, and we also make sure that, work with SHPRA to make sure they have all the recommendation requirements through the procurement process.
All
The
right.
may I just
Yeah,
follow? I'm sorry, I'm gonna follow up on that question because there's the two questions spring out of there. Usually, when we look at making sure that they fit a required standard, okay, there's a standard that we look at. And I wanted to know where I could find that. I mean, you don't have to, but if you can provide me with that standard you use, that would be of great help. The other aspect of this is that as I listen to you, I'm hearing a convergence of information on those students of ours, our scholars that need a lot of support physically, but also mixing it into the BIP profile, which is a behavioral intervention plan, which is they're not really synonymous, and you may have and they may intersect, okay, but I wanted to know, is there a clear delineation between that? Because I've worked a lot with Claremont, I've worked there, and I've seen the differences. So I wanted to know, do we differentiate as we dole out this contract, so to speak?
So if I'm understanding your question correctly, BCBAs, they really focus on our students with more severe behavioral issues and it requires like specialized and strategies and support through like ABA style strategies. So they work not directly with the students, but they work with staff to ensure they understand some of the supports and strategies needed to appropriately provide behavioral intervention to these students with more increased behaviors. So it's a lot of one-on-one support with students that is required. So the BCBA support them around understanding those strategies, how to implement those strategies, and working with our staff overall. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, because I didn't know whether we institutionalized a group of, we're pulling from this bucket of people and that bucket of people, and that's where I was looking at. Okay. Exactly. But thank you very much. I appreciate your answer, and we'll talk more detail offline. Okay.
Okay, no worries.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Peace.
SHPRA,
Thank you,
I
Denise.
wonder if you can hear me, and Commissioner Kenyatta Bay. Just to add as well, when we do the solicitation for this, the IFB that is done outlines the skills, the services, and the requirements that we're looking for in any organization to be able to come into the district and offer these services. So while Denise has done a great job at outlining what those are and who receives them mostly in our district, the IFB really sets the stage for the standards and the specific requirements that we have for each of these organizations. SHPRA, I don't know if that's something we typically share, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I was, I'm gonna send it to him.
Thank you. That's all I asked.
Yeah.
So I can go over it and, get rid of my ignorance. All right. Thank you.
No
Thank you, guys.
problem.
Thank you so much, ladies. I appreciate your help understanding and giving context to the procurement. All righty. I think that brings that portion of the agenda to the close. That was our only procurement. And like I said in the beginning, we do not have public comment today. I think the only action item is SHPRA is going to send Commissioner Kenyatta Bay a copy of the procurement Right, the procurement document. All righty, our next meeting is Tuesday, February 10th, where we'll focus on science. Yay. All righty, thank you so much for joining today. We look forward to our next meeting. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Peace.